Well, if you haven't noticed, you're indoors tonight. So we did move indoors. That sounds really loud. Is it super loud? It's good? Okay. John's like, forgot the hearing aids at home. This is good. All right. I love John Kirby. Anyway, well, welcome to Authentic Manhood. Thanks for coming back after the break. You know, sometimes you have a break in between week 3 and 4, like we have, and like people peace out, you know, because you just get out of the rhythm of it. So thanks for being here. Glad to see you. We're going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker here, all right? I want to know what you guys have been up to in October, okay? We'll see if this is going to work for me. Bam. So I want to know who's Mr. October. Okay, so you can use your phone and vote if you would like, or we can just do like hand raising, all right? But I want to see if anybody has done 5 of 5 October things, all right? So you'll get a point for each one that you've done. Raise your hand if you've gone to a pumpkin patch already this, no? How have you parents not been to a pumpkin patch? No Burger Farms or Blooms and Berries? Man, all right, raise your hand if you've gone to a haunted house. Has anyone gone to a haunted house? Carved a pumpkin or painted a pumpkin? Anybody done that? All right, we're all lame apparently. This is great. Though a lot of us have eaten candy. Raise your hand if you've eaten candy corn, which supposedly everybody hates, but I love it. I think it's delicious. And then raise your hand. Has anyone gone through a corn maze yet? Dang. All right, well, we still have 11 days to do some of these. Did anybody have 3 points? Did anybody do 3 of these? Harold? Nice. Rick, did you do 3? All right. Score. Nice. Well, Harold and Rick, you guys split Mr. October honors, okay? And your prize is you get every pretzel stick that's left when we end tonight. The caveat is, though, you have to eat them before you leave the building, okay? We all get to watch. It's going to be great. Well, anyway, I hope you guys had a good week off. Like, I had a great 4 days last weekend. I got to go to Mexico on a back-to-back trip with my son, my 14-year-old, so that was just amazing being down there and being with the people of Trace Race. And the Bengals won last week. The Bengals won today. So, you know, hopefully everybody's in high spirits if you're a Bengals person. But I'm excited to jump back in to the fun. And if anybody is at your first week here, like anybody like coming out, all right, awesome. You don't have to raise your hand too high. We're not going to make you dance or anything. Tell us your darkest sin, okay? This is a place of trust, Thomas. We're not going to do that. But what we've been talking about a lot in this series are these 3 words: control, significance, and comfort. And what we've been looking at is the idea that they are the bottom of this here glacier, iceberg, that they're underneath a lot of the things above, our actions, our thoughts, our feelings. They're the 3 drives that kind of motivate us a lot of times, whether we're thinking about them or not. And what happens is we can tend to start to make them idols, right? These things that we begin to kind of worship in our life. And probably there's one of these that resonates with you more than others, right? Like some of you, it might be control, maybe significance, or maybe comfort. And what can happen, and like anything in life, when it goes to an extreme, it can become just negative, right? And that's kind of what we've been exploring together as we've been sauntering through September and October on this drive. But tonight we're going to dive deeply, okay, into control, all right? And I missed that part. But they become functional gods: the God of control, the God of significance, God of comfort. We talked about how they make terrible gods because they're broken. They don't really fulfill the promises that they might make, that we might think they're making to us. And tonight we're going to talk about control. Try that again. Control. We're going to talk about control. We're going to dive deeper into control. And here's what I know. Probably most of us are starting to think, I don't struggle with control, Ryan, right? Like, Roger, that's what you're thinking. I don't struggle with control, Ryan. You're crazy, right? Well, here's a test. So I've designed a test that can help you understand if you struggle with control or not, all right? You want to try it? Do you remember You Might Be a Redneck, those jokes by Jeff Foxworthy? Okay, so there's a couple here. You might be a control freak if, all right, and let's see if any of these resonate with you. You have to drive anytime you go anywhere. Is anybody like that? Like, that's me, okay? Like, I went on a golf trip with literally my best friend in the world and his family, all people that I love, and it was only like 2 hours away, and I insisted on driving because you never know. Maybe I wanted to leave early. You know, maybe I wanted to run out to like Wendy's at 4 a.m. and grab like a Blizzard or Frosty or whatever Wendy's said. Like, I just had to drive. Maybe that's you, maybe not. It drives you crazy to watch someone do something the wrong way. Anybody feel that? Where like you're like at work and you know how to really do this thing, and then somebody else is doing it and you're watching it and you're just like, you got like a tick going on and you're like, oh man, it's can't. Right? Like, I'm trying to teach my 14-year-old son how to do things right now in life. And there were times in Mexico where I was watching him do something like painting. We painted a whole lot. And I'm watching him just make a disaster of this wall. Okay? Like, it looked like a 5-year-old painted it with their fingers by the time he was done with it. And I'm trying to like interject and give him little tips. And they don't really care because they just want it painted. You know, they're not very... You know, he did pretty good, though, Todd, didn't he? But it was hard to watch because there's stuff I wanted to fix. You know, I'm like, paint in a W, and he didn't do that. So maybe that's you. I'm going to try my remote again because it'd be nice if it worked. No, it's still not working how I want it to. Oh, man, that's not good. Don't look at those. Okay. Going into uncertain situations creates a lot of anxiety for you. Anybody feel that? Where like we went to Blink Friday night. I had never been to Blink. I didn't realize like 1.9 million people would be downtown at the exact same time, which is what it felt like. It might be a little bit of exaggeration, but it was very busy, okay? And I was stressed the whole drive there, and I don't know why. I'm with my wife, my 9-year-old. It should have been a fun night out, no responsibilities. It should have just been fun, but instead I was stressing pretty much the whole time until we got there and even into it. You check your work emails on vacation. Anybody do that? Like, I'm just going to unplug. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be on the beach. And, wait a second. I just want to check this, right? Maybe you might be a control freak. You reread your emails you've sent multiple times. Does anybody do this? Like, literally, I've done this week where I sent my boss an email, and I'm like, well, let me think. How did I word that? Let me go back and check this. And, you know, and it's like, and I don't know why I'm rereading it. I know what I wrote the first time. Well, I'm a control freak. Or, just confession time here, your name is Ryan. Okay, so if your name's Ryan, you're likely a control freak, whether you know it or not. But I think at one level, as men especially, we probably struggle with wanting to control, right? It's not as fun to be out of control. What we're going to learn tonight is it's scary, in fact. But I don't know if you remember this movie, but this is how I think we wish life would work. Back in 2006, there was a movie that came out with Adam Sandler, and don't you wish this could be true? Anybody remember that? Yeah, it's pretty cute. Wouldn't it be nice if life worked that way, though? Don't we want that? That you could just control life with a little remote in your hand, like I'm poorly controlling these slides. So here's what I want you to do. It's going to be a quick share. So you have 3 minutes. But what would you control in your life right now if you had that remote that Adam Sandler had in his hand? All right, 3 minutes, go. You're on the clock. All right, you guys look like a fun table. What did you guys come up with? What did your table come up with that you might control? Anybody? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're on the spot. Bill, what would you control?
We decided the kids
needed
better control.
Okay. So, Bill, you went with the kids, so like volume, pausing, speeding them up, any of that?
Blind obedience.
What was that?
Blind obedience.
Blind obedience. I didn't see that button on the remote, but it's there. Okay. Like, if you ever, like our 9-year-old, like, watching him, like, try to tie his shoes still when we're in a hurry, like, that's a lot of fun. Like, I wish I had the fast-forward button. Like, just speed it up for the love. What did you guys come up with over here, Ed? What might you control? Anybody want to share? Okay, well, Ed outright lied. Okay, he's totally lied. He said they have perfect lives.
I wish my wife would drive and I could sit in the other seat.
Okay, so you would have your wife drive so you could sit in the other seat. Okay, is that too much to ask for, people? Come on. All right, let's go to this table. Harold, what did you guys come up with? Anything good? What would you control?
You have the best one.
All right. You tell what Harold... No, I'm just kidding. Okay, there you go.
As we were just talking, I was just like, I would hit the rewind button
to go back and tell people don't do certain things that would save their life.
Ooh, yeah. That's a great one, right? Or just don't do certain things that I did that were stupid, right? Like, wouldn't that be nice if you could go back and undo some dumb things you've done in your life? That would be great. What about you, Alex? I know you got a bunch of regrets. What would you do?
Just going back like 2.5 years ago to get a different job.
I'm Alex's boss, okay? So I was Alex's boss up until just now.
I said fast forward my 35 to 40 minute drive to work every day.
Oh, that's good. I still don't know how you do that. Whew. Anybody else have a good one? Anyone good stuff, front table? Yeah, what do we come up with? Here, Bobby, you hand that to him. Thank you, sir.
Kiddingly,
Sure.
we agreed that we should have rewinded and asked for a different instructor for Authentic Manhood.
Oh, man.
I'm just kidding. That
It's
was the
too
kidding.
late,
I
Doug.
said kiddingly. No, I went really, really big, and it's, I don't know, seems trivial, but I don't know if you'd fast forward or reverse or whatever, but bring God back to the center of the world to solve everybody's problems right now.
Yeah. You could rewind or fast forward and get to that. You know, it depends. You're going to go pre-Genesis, pre-creation, or, yeah, I like it, though. Did I ask you guys didn't give me an answer yet. Roger, you guys always have good stuff. Give me one more good one. What would you control?
He would his daughters.
Do tell. Make it quick, but do tell.
8 13-year-old girls at a birthday party Friday night, and you wish you could just fast forward through the girl drama was real.
Oh,
it
man.
was heavy.
That's the worst, yeah. Yeah, back in my student ministry days when we do like lock-ins, like that was the thing in like the 90s. You do like a lock-in in your church. You get like 70 high school kids, boys and girls, put them all together. What's the worst that could happen, right? And man, I would have loved a remote for some of those because it'd be like 11:30 at night and you're like, I'm here till 7 a.m. with these people. This is horrible. Yeah, like don't we feel that though? Like it would be nice to be able to control life a little more. But I think there's there's a few ways to think about this idea of control. That it sounds kind of fun, and maybe we think we struggle with it, maybe we don't. But here's what we're going to look at tonight is like control is sort of like the tree above the ground. Okay, a different analogy. But underneath it, there's always something that's driving the desire for it. Okay, and whether for you control is like year one of the three, control, significance, and comfort, or if it's just a little one for you, there's something underneath of it that's driving it. And tonight we're going to try to unpack that. Like authentic manhood, sort of this slow burn from week to week, right? Where you're like, we've already talked about these 3 words like 5 times, Ryan. Like, when are we going to move on? Well, we just dig a little deeper into them to try to understand them. And here's the big premise of tonight, okay, that I want you to really think about and digest, okay? So much so that I'm going to ask Roger to read it. All right, so Roger, I want you to read that for me.
Fear is both the cause and byproduct of our lust for control.
Yeah, I like your microphone better. Fear is both the cause and byproduct of our lust for control. That when you look behind control, what you're always going to see or always going to find is fear. We're gonna look at this idea that fear is the soil that our yearning for control grows out of. Yeah, you know those moments like in the middle of the night. Like as I've gotten older, I get up to pee in the middle of the night. Anybody else get up to pee in the middle of the night? Like it's amazing. I'm thinking about just wearing diapers, so I don't have to do that anymore because it's annoying. I wake up, it's like 3:21 or something, and I like get out of bed, take off my CPAP. It's very romantic stuff in the Ventura bedroom going on. Take off my CPAP. I wear a wrist guard so my wrists don't fall asleep, mouthpiece. It's quite nice. And I go to the bathroom, and then I come back, and what happens is like all the worries starts playing in my head, right? And I start worrying about the thing at work, right? And I'm like, oh man, I wonder I wonder what he meant when he said that. Like, did he mean it this way or did he mean it this way? And I start thinking about like that, that situation in our finances where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do about that. And sometimes it's good, right? Where you're like, I don't know what to do. This is good, but I don't know what to do with good. Should I do this part of the good or this part of the good? I like it. Or sometimes you start thinking about like what's going on with your relationship with your wife, and there's tension there or drama there, or your kids, right? Like your kids don't stop being your kids until you leave this earth, right? Like I've got a 19-year-old, and I worry about her just as much as I worry about my 9-year-old. And I'm told by you saints in the room that are older than me that you worry about your 39-year-olds just as much as you do your 9-year-olds, right? Like it just never stops. And those middle of the night fears, they just build and they grow. And that becomes the soil for the things that we then start to try to control during the daylight hours, right? Because if I can control them, they're less scary. So here's what I want you to do at your tables. And this will be a little more of a typical share time, so probably about 7 or 8 minutes. I want you to think of those middle of the night moments, okay? What keeps you up at night moments. And I want you to look at it through the lens of the men at your table, okay? So if most of the men at your table are still like young men, okay? Like Roger. Sorry, Roger. Never sit in front. Maybe what were the middle of the night fears at that stage of life? Or we all remember. I remember the things I was fearful of in, my early 20s, Andy. Like I remember the stuff that was going through my head. Or early in your career, right? Like those like mid to late 30s where you're mid 20s to like mid 30s where you're trying to like carve out the path, like make your legacy, or maybe midlife, right? Where you're like, I'm into this stuff now. Or maybe the back 9, or the back 3. Like, what are the different fears that, like, you are worrying about in the middle of the night at your table? So maybe share from your perspective with your age, and then we'll touch base here in about 8 minutes, all right? All righty. Well, love hearing you guys share. I think it's the best part of the night. Definitely beats the presenter, probably better than the pretzels as well, which I love that these guys got the pretzels, brought them to their table. That is grabbing life by the horns right there, baby. Well, what were some fears that came up? Jeff, you want to? That's true. So it's fear, yep, control, fear. I like it. So any fears that you came up with as like a young man, maybe you remember, maybe you are a young man like Andy Maui here. What are the fears of a young man in the middle of the night, Andy?
Well, number one is just doing well in the career. Is, are you good enough for what you are doing, Are you able to hit your numbers and all that so that way, you can continue and really kind of just be a superstar, so to speak. So that's kind of a fear is, am I good enough at my job?
Yeah, that's a great one, right? Like I think every man in this room can relate with that one, right? Either you remember it or even you think it now. Any other young man fears that came up at your table? As I stumble around from chair to chair here. Diet Coke's kicking in, feeling it. Any other? What do you remember being scared about as a young man? Jeff, what do you remember when you were, not that you're not young now, because it's all relative, but what do you remember as a fear as a young man? Michael, will you pass that to Jeff for me? Thank you, sir. Get either or. You guys can tag team this sucker, okay? It's Jeff squared plus Stu equals awesome. There you go. All right.
As a young man, the fear was being able to support. I have a lot of children. And being able to support them in a manner in which their mothers wanted them to be supported.
Okay.
This is a man thing, right? It's not
Sure,
you're not recording this, are you?
Yeah. So not just food on the table, but like the right kind of vacations and the right kind of clothes and I gotcha. Other Jeff. Let's just go all in on the Jeffs. Any other Jeffs here? Raise your hand. No? Okay. Jeff.
I can remember as a young man, after college was over, and college was the big social time in your life, right? I wondered, was I ever going to get married? And I always wanted to, and so I ended up getting married when I was 27 years old, and I dated my wife for 3 months, and I knew I was going to marry her because I hadn't dated before. But that was I had a several year period where I was like, Lord, maybe I'm not going to get married. And,
Yeah.
I had a kind of a fear of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's go like early in your career or midlife. We'll put those together for the sake of time here. What are the fears of us midlife guys? Scott, you look like you're squirming over there. Why don't you tell me something?
I think a lot of us were talking about kids and just, putting them on the right direction and what kind of the balance between nurture and nature are. Like, are we giving them what they need, and how different kids turn out differently, and, wanting to have those guardrails, but also knowing when to let them kind of go outside the guardrails.
It's tough. Any, I don't know, back nine kind of fears? What you feeling, Stu?
My dad bought a business. This is 100 years ago, like 1952. Okay, when I was 10. 4 years later, my parents were broke. The business failed. That stuck in my brain as something, not wanting to have to make a whole change, start over. That's not wanting to start over when you're in your 40s. Now, I went out and started my own business, same age, 43, and it worked. But I was very conscious of that the whole time, that seriously, the fear of having to start again, move when you don't want to move, couldn't afford to buy a house, had to rent. I got my first job working, we were in Nebraska. My first money was working on a farm. And then when we got back to Lincoln, Nebraska, which is the state capital, my next job was washing dishes at Kresge's. So, it was probably good for me, but it was awfully tough on my parents, and it left a huge lesson about growing up. Keep an ace up your sleeve if you can, this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing, Stu. Stu said something I think resonates with me for sure, the idea of like the fear of failure in general. I think for men, that's a big one, man. Whether it's like you're 12 at the knothole game or you're, 52 and you're like crushing in your career, but you're taking that one step out and you're like, is this going to work? Like your dad starting that business or you starting that business. Any across the whole gamut, any other fears that maybe you think is typical to men, or maybe that you had? I'll go Jeff and then Thomas.
There's two Jeffs that basically had the same thing.
Yeah.
And that was, fear of something happening to our female children, whether they can handle it or not, or whether we want to control them or not. It stands out even today. I mean, my oldest is 47, my youngest is 14, and when I wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and I can't go back to sleep, I'm not good. I don't know if you want to expand upon that or not, or it's the same thing. It's just, how do we not control their lives, but try and make sure that they're safe, even just walking around the neighborhood, because even that's not safe anymore.
Yeah, that'll keep you up in the middle of the night. We have 360. I don't know if you guys know that app, if you're parents, but like both of our daughters drive now, 19 and 17, and every time they're driving somewhere, there's this little part of me that's terrified, where I'm like fighting, checking the 360 to make sure that they're driving fine. And our 17-year-old totaled her car this summer, so that didn't help that fear, right? If anything, it cemented it in my mind. But Thomas, last one here.
Right, middle of the night fear. Am I living the calling that the Lord has for me? Is the work that I'm doing, the way I'm raising my family, the way I'm managing myself, how I'm reaching out to others? Am I living the calling that the Lord has for me?
Yeah. Right, and isn't that true? We want to live lives that matter, have meaning, purpose. I'll make my way back up front here eventually. Walking around. All right, so I think we all kind of resonate with those moments. Again, whether it's you and tiny bladder syndrome like me waking up in the middle of the night, maybe it's like you're on a long drive or a long flight and your mind just goes to stuff. But often there's these fears that just kind of reside inside of us, and we gotta figure out what to do with them. And often one of the outlets to that is control. And as I shared earlier, our desire for control grows out of the soil of fear. And it creates what I call the fear control cycle, in my life at least, where fear, these things arise in my heart, and then they rise up and I start to, because we're problem solvers as men, right? We're like, okay, there's this fear about finances, so I just need to do this tomorrow. Or there's this fear about this relationship, so I just need to have this conversation or press in here. We try to fix it, and we go all the way up to the top there to control it. Page 84, we're going to get into the books. Look at that. Woo! Page 84, number 2, control number 1. If that makes any sense. Let me look and see if that makes sense. Yeah. So Roman numeral number 2, control. Number 1, it starts with the deep idol. So that's what it starts with. And here's what we're about to read. We're going to read the big lie, okay? Because here's the big lie of control. It's going to lay it out for us. It says, the deep idol of control tells us the fundamental lie that if I can just maintain influence or mastery over the situation or the people in my life or my performance, my schedule, my income, or whatever, and I put in there health circumstances, because as I've gotten older, that plays into there, let me tell you, then I'll be okay, content, dominant, strong, safe, happy, whatever adjective you want to kind of throw in there. Okay, so it's the big lie is that, like, man, if I can just control those things, if they weren't always so stinking elusive, right, like trying to hold on to like wet spaghetti noodles, then my life would be better, right? And what we're going to discover is that that's just kind of a lie. It's not true, and it creates these equations in our minds and our hearts where it's like, hey, if my control can just be, greater than the situations going on in my life, then I'll be happy. Right? Like none of us like surprises, right? Like we have 4 vehicles right now. Makes it sound like I'm a wealthy man. But they're all old, okay? It's like I'm like duct taping these things together at points. And it's like hilarious. It's like a roulette wheel of cars breaking down. Where like everything's going wrong. Like I came out the other morning and like my 19-year-old's car wouldn't start, and I had just been trying to fix our van, which wouldn't start. And my 17-year-old has a car with bad wheel bearings, right? And it's like I am just like cycling through the cars, and luckily my dad was a General Motors UAW guy, so he taught me a little bit about cars, and I know how to watch YouTube videos, and I'm dumb enough to try stuff, right? So I just put stuff up on jacks and get under there and have at it, But man, I really wish I could control the situations in our life. I think I'd be happier, or I really wish I could control the people. Like, don't you wish you could just, like, people did what they either should do or what you think they should do, or at least what you tell them to do, right, when they're your kids, and you're like, please just do what you're asked to do, and if they would just listen, then I would be happy. I'd be happy, Matt, if my 9-year-old would just go to bed when I say it's bedtime, but instead I'm having this, like, argument, and it's like a trial going on where he's outwitting me and his arguments back at me, and I'm like, just go to bed and brush your teeth, please. If he would just listen, I'd be happy. Or my income, right? If I just made a little bit more, right? Just not much more, just a little bit more, right? Just a little bit more, I'd be happy. Well, I've been saying that every decade, and I make a little bit more every decade, but it's still just a little bit more until I find happiness. Or if I could just control life in general, right? Like if the world just went how I want it to, how I think it should go, wave my magic wand and, it just, everything happens. We got a big election coming up. If everything just happened the way I think it should happen, then I'll be happy. Woo! Well, here's the problem with these equations is it's like bad math, okay? Because what happens is we figure out pretty quickly that like we have zero control over like a whole lot of things in our lives, right? Like we think we have control, but it's an illusion most of the time, right? There's very few things that we can actually control with much consistency. So that's frustrating. And then, and this one takes a little more nuance, then what's really tricky for me is sometimes it does work out and I do have control over something, but then it doesn't pay off. It doesn't actually make me happy. Have you ever had that? Like, this went exactly how I wanted it to, and it still sucks. Like, there's times where I look at my life and I'm like, I love my wife, I love my kids, I love my job. We've got a beautiful house in Anderson, right? Like, we've got a dog named Bear. He's a golden retriever. He's amazing, right? There's literally nothing about my life that I'm like, I would change this for sure. But there's still these moments where like, it just doesn't quite scratch the itch, you know? Maybe we should just move to Hawaii or something, Thomas, you know? Let's just get crazy and throw caution to the wind, you know? It's just... So the equations don't even add up, and they frustrate us. And where we wind up is, we'll come back to that, is the cycle kind of goes back to fear. Okay, because when we realize we have no real control in general, like really I don't control my health. Really I don't honestly control my income, right? Like I don't know about you, but like my boss isn't standing here saying, hey, I'm going to pay you for the next 30 years of your life until you retire. You know, like that's not a deal that I have. I don't have control over that. None of us have control over the economy or the lackluster results. What happens is it drives us back to fear. And then what do we do? What do we do when we've made one loop from fear to control and we're back at fear? What do you think the next step is for most of us? We're getting to that. We're getting to that. That too. Here's what we do is we double down on control, right? Like, well, no, I got to reel this in even tighter then, right? Like the ship's still a little too loose here. And we crank down even more on control. And it's just a cycle because it's a fear control cycle that plays out. In the book, we breeze by that. But on page 85, I love this. We can have a deep idol of control to the point that it can overwhelm us with fear. That this is kind of a scary place to be, where you had these fears and you instituted the control measures that you thought would work. And then when they don't, it gets extra terrifying and extra fearful, at least in my life. It's sort of like this. Anybody remember Indiana Jones? Right, like, isn't that how life feels sometimes? Like there's a gigantic boulder and it's chasing you. You know, and early in your career, it's the boulder of like, what am I meant to do? Do I have what it takes? Like, should I be an attorney or should I start my own business? Or, you know, maybe I should just be one of those handsome stay-at-home dads. That'd be nice. All right, like David Stuckey. You know, like maybe I should do that. And it's chasing us. And then into your career, you're trying to like, again, make enough money to like buy a house and, you know, provide for your kids and put away money in retirement. Oh, you got to put away money in the college fund too, right? And it's just like, whew, you're just getting chased by this boulder. And I'm finding, again, as I hit midlife at 48, and I imagine some of you that are smarter and wiser ahead of me in the journey are finding out, is like health becomes that too, or you start worrying about that. You know, and you're like, well, what about this? You know, like I'm going to start eating flaxseed and, you know, drinking this. And it gets exhausting, and it becomes a boulder that's chasing us through life. There's results of this fear control cycle, and they play out in a couple of ways. And here's where we'll look at the book a little bit more together tonight. The fear control cycle plays out in the workaholism. That's a big word. Workaholism trap, the anger trap, the power trap, and the numbing trap. And let's look at the workaholism first one on page 85, 4A. Having work under control gives us the illusion and mirage of security. It makes us think our future is protected. Like I would imagine we can all think of times where things in our personal life were so out of control that we were going to control whatever fiefdom we could control, and sometimes that's work, right? We're like, I'm going to control the heck out of this because stuff at home is crazy, or stuff in my health is crazy. Workaholism, we double down there. The need for control drives fear, and fear can drive workaholism. Page 85, 4B. We are so afraid of not having control that we can't take a break. Have you ever had that moment? My best friend in the world like struggles to take vacations. Like he's a super successful guy. He probably gets like 8 weeks of PTO a year. I mean, they're like super flexible with him. And it's hard to get the dude to go to like Gatlinburg for a 2-day weekend. Like literally, he just can't mentally let go because he's got to be in the game. You know, he's got to, if he leaves, what's going to happen? I don't know. Maybe the world will fall apart if I'm not answering emails, if I'm not, selling. So one of the results of this fear control cycle that plays out in our lives is we become workaholics, right, where we're just working all the time because we can control that. The next one is the anger trap. Page 85, 5A. Fear can make us an angry person with a short fuse and an explosive, toxic tongue. Right? I think most of us as guys, like, we don't like being fearful, right? We don't like being out of control. And for many of us, that plays out in anger, right? Where, like, you lash out with your words. You lash out with your actions. Maybe you get passive aggressive. Maybe you just shut off your wife emotionally for a while because you're kind of mad. You're kind of pouting, right? We get mad because life's not going how we want it to go. That's another byproduct of this cycle. And here's the quote that I love in your book, that you look behind anger and you will find fear. Look behind fear and you will find control. And there's that cycle playing out, right? That 99% of the time when I'm angry about something, it probably has to do with some fear going on in my life, right? Like, think about the stuff you get angry about at work. Like, there's, you would think working at church is like the perfect place to work, right, John Kirby? I mean, it's like God-ordained work happening here. There's no bad decisions made here. It's all beautiful. We come here and we all sing Kumbaya and hold hands and eat communion wafers when you guys aren't looking, right? Like, it's crazy. No, it doesn't work that way all the time, right? And what I'm finding is, like, the times where I get angry about a decision or angry about something not going how I would have wanted it to go are often tied to fears that I have about me, about my identity, about do they think I'm valuable or not? You guys get it. And it's this cycle of control, fear, and anger that can play out in our lives. Because none of us like being out of control. It's not fun. The third one's the power trap. Again, this is a result of being chased by that Indiana Jones boulder of fear and control. Number 6, the power trap is motivated by the desire to dominate. So there's a few different, hopefully what you're seeing here is there's different responses to fear that each of us might have. Some of us might double down at work. And we're like, hey, if I can't control personal life, I'm going to control work life. You better believe me. Some of us get angry, right? Like, this isn't how it's supposed to work, so I'm mad. And anger plays out in lots of different ways, not just screaming. But some of us become dominant. We become people that just mow over everybody else because I am not going to not be in control. Like, if you ran into anybody like that, we're like, they're not fun bosses typically, right? They're probably not fun employees typically to manage. They're going to steamroll you because they're staying in control no matter what. And the last one, which I just threw in for fun, it's not even in the book, so this is just extra. You don't have to pay me anymore, okay? Is the numbing trap. That I think for some of us, we know that thing's chasing us, and man, there's fear and control, and the cycle's playing out, and I don't even want to think about it, right? Like, it's like, it can chase me all at once, but if I'm watching Netflix and eating a bag of barbecue chips, then it's got a while yet, that we just numb ourselves because we don't even want to think about it. And that obviously has a ton of negative consequences in our lives. So that was a lot of info, okay? And here's what I want you to wrestle with. All right, we have about 18 minutes left. So I want you to take eight minutes and think of these, the results of maybe the fear control cycle playing out in your life, And which one in particular are you most susceptible to? Okay, maybe you've conquered it, and you're like, you know what? I used to get angry, and I've defeated that, but I know it's a weakness, right? Like my dad was an alcoholic who stopped drinking when I was about 12, but he told me my whole life that he was still an alcoholic, right? Like because it was still in him. That was still his susceptibilities. So what are you most susceptible to when you start to feel like you're about to be ran over by the fear control boulder catching up with you? Okay? 8 minutes. Have at it. Good conversations happening. I hate to stop you because I'm hearing awesome stuff. How many of you guys is like again? You feel that you feel the weight of that, the fear control kind of cycle, this boulder chasing you through life. How many of you guys relate more with workaholism? Like you're like, I'm just going to be a workaholic. I'm going to double down. I'm going to work my way out of this mess, right? Which you can do with some things in life, but you can't do that with the other things in life, right? Okay, how many of you guys relate with anger? Like how many of you guys, it just makes you mad? And do you ever have that moment where you're just mad? You don't even know why you're mad? Like, I'm just angry. Like my wife will be like, what's wrong? I don't even know. You know what I mean? I'm just like ticked off about something. I don't know what it is, you know? Like, yeah. Anybody is at power that you just like, hey, I am going to force my way through this, whether they like it or not, right? Yeah. Anybody numbing? You're like, I don't even care about that. I'm just going to go think about something else. You know, like people are like, hey, man, you should be a little worried about this. What are you talking about? Right? I don't know what you're talking about. Well, your house is being like foreclosed. Oh, I don't care. You know, like it's just, you see that, right? It sounds comical, but you see that, and I've lived it, man. Like I've ignored some dumb stuff in my life. You know what I mean? Where you don't even want to think about it. Don't have time to go down any rabbit trails, or I would. Okay, so what do we do with that? Because here's kind of the $1 million question that we come to. We've been driving towards all night long, okay? Page 86. You get to turn a page in your book. It's a big night. Will somebody read this for me through this here microphone so you get to hear somebody else's voice besides mine? Anybody brave enough? Yeah, Matt, can you it's in your book too, Matt, if you want to. 86, number 1, Matt.
Fear creates a fork in the road, and we can either turn or run to ourselves, or we can turn to and run to God. I knew that was coming. And his truth and grace.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot you didn't have that blank filled in yet. Luckily, the answer was God. That made it pretty easy for you. Let's be honest. But think about this. Remember a few weeks ago, I used this analogy of the broken cisterns, right? Where I was like, hey, here's what Jeremiah 2:13 tells us. It tells us that my people have created 2 sins. And again, sin's just a big, fancy religious word for like us choosing our own way and kind of being like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Talk to the hand, right? They've forsaken me, right? The eternal water, the living water, and they've dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that can't even hold water. And we're trying to get life from this thing that's broken. Well, that's what this is saying, is like the fear in our lives drives us to this crossroads where we have this moment of decision, right? Am I going to double down on being the man and stepping up, and I'm going to work harder, or I'm just going to get angry and shake my fist at the world, or I'm just going to dominate my way through this person or this issue, or I'm just not going to think about it. I'm going to eat this, do this, look at this, I shouldn't, smoke this, I shouldn't. Like, I'm just going to numb myself to it. Are we going to run towards that, or are we going to run towards God, who I would say the Christian perspective of that is he's the one entity in the universe that can help us deal with the fear in our lives. And oh, by the way, Jesus lived it. Like, that's what's beautiful about the Christian faith, is that the God of the universe leaves heaven and he comes to earth and he experiences every single temptation that we experienced. Have you thought about that? That Jesus knew everything you've been tempted to do that might have been wrong. He faced the fears that we face, and he trusted in the Father. And that's kind of the blueprint that's laid out for us here. So what do we do with the fears? Well, we run to Jesus. Do you know what the most frequent command in the Bible is? Is it be holier than Chad Hovind, or at least Drew? No, it's not that, okay? Is it give 10% of your money to the church? No, it's not that. You already said it, but anybody else? What do you think it is? Ryan Hill. Fear not, right? Like, don't be afraid. And anecdotally, you'll see on like social media and stuff, they'll be like, it says it 365 times in the Bible, one time for every day. And really, when you study it, it's about 146 times in the Bible, unless you kind of like start bending the language a little bit. Then you get to 365. But pretty straightforward. If you're just looking at don't be afraid, about 146 times the Bible tells us don't be afraid. And I think that's with good reason, because we're fearful. Like, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Like, we have fears, and God's saying, don't be afraid. And I say to God, well, why not? It's pretty scary, right? Like, life can be scary at times. Why shouldn't I be afraid, God? And here's his answer over and over again. He says, have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. And here's why, okay? For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That God's saying, hey, don't be afraid or dismayed. You don't have to, because I'm with you every single place you're going to go in life. Okay, you go through a bankruptcy, I'm with you. You go through a divorce, I'm with you. You go through cancer, I'm with you, right? Something tragic happens in the life of somebody you love, I'm with you, right? Like, that's the promise of the Bible. It's not pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's not be better. It's not work harder. It's not dominate your way through. The promise of the Bible is don't be afraid, because I'm going to be with you. And men, that's the encouragement I want to give you tonight as you think of your lives. I want to end with this one little thought here. Think of the thing right now that you're trying to control the most, if you're being honest, okay? And you don't have to tell anybody. You're not going to write this down on a piece of paper and burn it or something, but what's the thing right now that you're trying to control the most? Is it a relationship? Is it your finances? Is it your health? Is it your career? Like, what is that for you? Hopefully, I think we're all thinking of one, okay? Well, what's the fear driving that? Like, what's the fear underneath it? So think about it. I got a minute left. So think about it. Like, if your biggest thing you're trying to control is maybe your marriage, like maybe you're a controlling husband, they exist. Well, probably the fear underneath that is she's going to leave me, right? Like, I'm not good enough for her. I don't have what it takes. What happens if she leaves, right? Or what if, like, you're trying to control your kids and they've got to act a certain way, be a certain way? Well, then the fear beneath that is like, well, what happens if my kid does that, right? Or what happens if that happens to my kid? That's a huge fear. Stu, I thought, shared a great story from his past. Like, if your biggest control that you're trying to control is financial and stability, well, the fear underneath that probably is, well, what's going to happen if I don't have my job? Who's going to take care of me if I can't pay my bills? Like, what? So I would encourage you to have that conversation, no matter where you are in the faith paradigm, whether you're like, can't spell God, you're like G-A-W-D, wherever you are in that, or you're like, Billy Graham's prayer partner, even though Billy Graham's in heaven, wherever you are in that, have this conversation with God this week. Okay, maybe tonight when you're driving home, think of that thing that you're trying to control most, and then fears are normal, they're natural. So have that conversation with God. Hey, if I'm being honest, I'm kind of scared about my insert here, and just see what happens, because the promise that he makes us is that he's with you wherever you go. So whatever all those fears are that we all just thought of that's driving that one thing we're really trying to control, God's saying, I'm meeting you right in the middle of that. Let me pray. God, thank you for these men. Thanks for tonight. Thank you that your promise isn't that we need to work harder, try harder just not be scared, but that your promise is that we can not be fearful because you are with us, and you are mighty, and you do have our lives in the palm of your hand, and where we're out of control, you are in control. So we thank you for that and love you. In your name, amen. Hey, friends, this week and next week, there'll be surveys on your table. If you want to fill them out and just stack them right here, we would love that. We're always trying to make this better. Next week, last session of Authentic Manhood, we'll have Mio's and we'll have beer from a variety of places, 50 West and others. So hope you have a great week. Thanks for being here.